Good evening or afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Good? Um, I want to start by giving y'all a couple of dates. The first one is 2045 because that's why you're here, is to help us plan what the city of High Point will be in 2045. Okay? Now, in 2045, if I'm still here, I'll be, I'm a lawyer because I couldn't do math. I'll be 76, 77 years old. So you have to make sure you create a city that I'm going to like too, not just you young people. Um, but that's why you're here, so that we can help plan and create a document that's going to help guide the growth of the city for the next 20 plus years. And you may think that's a long time, okay? But I'm going to give you a second date, October 15th, 2005. And none of y'all know what happened. Maybe Lee might know what that is. He will as soon as I say it. October 15th, 2005 was the first meeting of the Core City Plan Steering Committee. Okay? And from that plan, it's the plan that birthed all other plans, right, Lee? That's right. So that was the first time the city of High Point really started looking at our core, at our downtown, at the neighborhoods around downtown. And October 15th, 2005 was the first meeting. Some people remember when they got saved. I remember when I went to the first meeting of the Core City Plan Steering Committee. so, so, um, um, so why I'm telling you that is that's almost 18 years ago that meeting occurred. And I remember us developing that plan. I think it was passed in 2007. And people would ask me then, they'd say, is this stuff really going to happen? You know, this is great. When's it going to happen? And I would tell them, I hope I live to see it. And they would kind of laugh, like some of y'all are smiling. But no, really, I was hoping I would live to see it because these development plans can take 20 years. So when you're thinking about 2045, don't forget 2005 because the things that you're going to be doing in the coming time period, I don't know how long that time period is going to be exactly, but in the coming weeks and months is really important. And it's going to make a difference for what the city will be in 2045. So when you're thinking about 2045, don't stop thinking about 2015 or 2005 because before you know it, 2045 is going to be here. And you'll be able to look back and see the fruit of what you helped create. So I want to thank all of you for being here and being a part of this. It's really important that we get a cross-section of voices, that we get a cross-section of our citizens so that we can plan a city that's going to be great for everybody. Since October 15th, 2005, we really have been trying to create a city, and especially a downtown, that everybody can claim ownership of, that everybody can feel that they belong to, that they can go to and feel comfortable. Because we want a city that doesn't grow in silos based on community. We want a place where everybody can come, where everybody feels ownership, so that we can all learn from one another and learn about one another. So with that, I want to thank you again for being here because your work is very, very important to the future of the city. And like I said before, I hope I live to see it because 20 years is a long time. But take heart because your work is important. Our speaker tonight, part of my job is to introduce our speaker, and I need I'm going to have council produce some kind of a resolution that says that any instructions given to the mayor have to be in at least 20-point type. I'm really happy to introduce to you Anita Brown-Graham. Anita and I have known each other for a while. We met as part of the North Carolina Leadership Forum several years ago and have been able to spend some time together here and there. And she is just such a smart, wonderful person. And I was so excited to hear that she would be coming to High Point to speak with you today because she has so much to offer us for the future of this plan. Anita Brown-Graham launched the UNC School of Government's NC Impact Initiative in 2017, which was designed to expand the School of Government's capacity to work with public officials on complex policy issues. Brown-Graham and her colleagues have devised programs to support communities working on opportunity youth, educational attainment, economic mobility, poverty, the expansion of pre-kindergarten, extending the labor pool, and mitigating opioid misuse. Brown-Graham is a William C. Friday Fellow, American Marshall Fellow, and Eisenhower Fellow. In 2021, she was named the Distinguished Eisenhower Fellow of the Year. In 2013, the White House named her a Champion of Change for her work. The Triangle Business Journal named her a 2014 Woman in Business for her policy leadership in the state, and a 2017 CEO of the Year for work at the Institute of Emerging Issues at NC State University. And in 2021, honored her with the first ever Anita Harris Legacy Award for her commitment to small business. Brown-Graham serves on the boards of several organizations. She earned her undergraduate degree from Louisiana State University and a law degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. You can learn more about her and her program at ncimpact.org. And I would like to take this time to welcome her. And so, Dr. Brown-Graham, welcome to High Point.
Thank you so much. It is always wonderful to be with you, and I hate that this time we're not having cocktails at the baseball park. Okay, I'll meet you there. How about that? Hi, everyone. Dear Lord. I'm gonna try this again because, like, I drove all the way here. I expected just a little bit more love. Hi, everyone. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I was promised people who want to be in conversation. So thank you so much for having me here. There are a couple of things I want to try to do this evening. First, I'm going to ask a couple of questions to try to assess the aptitude and attitude towards change in this room. It won't take long, but I've got 10 questions that are either going to show you up or show you out. From there, we'll talk a little bit about how some of the drivers of change for those questions continue to be drivers of change as you think about here through 2045. Those drivers are organized into 4 segments, and at the end of each segment, I've got some questions for you. So if you thought you just came here to sit quietly and listen to me, no. It's also totally fair game for you to ask any questions of me. We're here until 7, but my plan is at 6:45 to call it quits so that those of you who want to meet the mayor and I somewhere for cocktails can do that. I'll be here for the other 15 minutes and happy to answer any individual questions from anyone. Does that work? Now, before I get into my questions of you, I need to tell a little story. It's the story of a girl who needed to go to High Point to meet with stakeholders who are on fire about their community's future. That girl is married to a very sweet guy who said, I will drive you to High Point, girl, so that you don't have to come back alone. Girl said, thank you, you very sweet guy. As they left the house, girl said to guy, would you please put my shoes in the car? Guy said, of course, my sweet girl. They drive to High Point. in absolute bliss, pull into a parking lot, and girl says to guy, "Could you pass me my shoes, please?" And guy says, and girl, therefore, is speaking to these stakeholders on fire in her tennis shoes. Now, I'm not one for outing people, but if you're kind, good folks in High Point, if you actually remember the day you were saved from whatever for whatever, I will tell you that Guy is sitting in the back of the room. And if before you leave, you pass him a note with a place where he can take girl to a very nice dinner in High Point, they actually might make it to year 33 of marriage. Do what you can. Help a brother out, please. All right. So I've got 10 questions, 2 series of 5. The first questions are meant to gauge how much change you've seen in your life. The second set are meant to gauge how quickly you have adapted to or adopted change. In order to play this game with me, I need everybody to raise their hands. One hand, everybody. All right, you're all winners at the beginning of the game. It's fabulous. Now keep your hand up. I'm going to say a statement, and if the statement is true, you keep your hand up. The minute I get to a statement that is not true for you, you put your hand down. So if you agree with the statement, your hand stays up. If you don't agree with the statement, you put your hand down. Does that work? All right. First statement. You remember as a child having a drone with a string on the end of it. It was called a kite. Right? Second, you have some memory of sitting in front of a television that was in a big old wooden box. And on the top of the box was something called rabbit ears. Wow. Third, you actually remember a time when failing to get to the bank by 5 o'clock meant you were one broke person all weekend. You've lived a good life. Fourth, you can remember when parents yelled at kids to come inside rather than yelling at them to put down the gaming console and go outside. All right. Fifth, you can remember at least one time in your life when you were lost in a strange town and found yourself driving around and around looking for something called a payphone. All right. Once it's down, it's down. You are out. You are out. You don't know what it's like to be broke on a weekend. You're out. All right. Second series, this is about the adoption. Keep your hands up if they're up. If they're down, keep them down. You do not own a smartphone. You do not own a smartphone. Right? Do not. Again, if the statement is true for you, keep your hand up. If you don't agree with it, not true for you, put your hand down. You have, how many people do we have with hands up still? 1, 2, 2. Oh, okay. All right, now I'm going. Are you up or are you down? What? Is it a smartphone or not a smartphone? What? You're out. Well, oh, totally respect that. But it is true that sometimes the phone is smarter than us, and it's really user error. Just saying. All right, so we've got one hand up. Let's see if you can. Let's see if you can make it through this one. You have never, ever used Amazon. All right, so Bezos for the win. I don't care how much you're holding out on change. It's hard not to use Amazon. A gift for you from Amazon. All right, thank you all for that. You use a full service gas station and pay cash. That assumes there is even one around. Yeah. And then you're holding out hope that your second grade teacher was wrong and Pluto really is a planet. Hey, some of us have got to resist change. All right, so you can see without much explanation here that we're talking a lot about technological changes. In this presentation, we're also going to talk about some social, economic, and environmental changes. These are only a few of the drivers. We would have to be here for a weekend for me to talk through all of the drivers that are important to North Carolina and particularly to this region. But I picked a couple to get us started, and I will leave it to the city staff to take you all the way on the rest of them. All right. So we're going to start by talking about the changing economic context because in some ways it feels to me that economic restructuring is a particularly appropriate place to start in High Point. Played our game. I did something. All right. So I spend a lot of my time going across the state of North Carolina and just trying to understand what people want. In fact, I helped the Department of Commerce to write the current economic development plan and did focus groups with hundreds across the state. And what every single community says they want, without exception, is an inclusive economy with opportunities for meaningful employment and careers for all their residents throughout their lives and across generations. The mayor wasn't joking when he said he wants to be able to love living here. He probably wants to be able to afford to live here too, right? So here are some of the things that came from this economic development plan. When we think about economic disruptions, we're often talking about disruptions in the workplace, but to be comprehensive and to really build an inclusive economy, we also need to respect that there have been significant changes to the workplace over the years, right? Not just the workforce, but the workplace. What we see in North Carolina, and it is absolutely true of the economy in this region, is an expanding bifurcation of the labor market. A bunch of low-wage jobs, more high-wage jobs being created, but we are missing a lot of our middle-wage jobs. That's part of what's so different about the workplace. We've actually seen, despite all of the around inflation and inflation around wages, pretty much stagnation in real wage jobs. So when you look at what's happening in the labor market in North Carolina, even post-COVID, there are some low-wage jobs where you have seen increases. There are some high-wage jobs where you've seen increases, but for the most part, not enough to change the overall trajectory that wages are pretty flat, even in the midst of inflation. When we think about challenges to the workforce, childcare reigns supreme. Is there anybody in this room who is paying for childcare at this moment? And how much are you paying? Would you care to share? How much? 400 a week? You could send your child to Carolina for less than that. Just think about that. High quality childcare is expensive, but for most people, it's not just the expense, it's the availability. Can you even find childcare? And when we talk to people who are leaving the job market or who have left and will not return, for a lot of people, predominantly young women, this is the reason. It just doesn't make sense. The juice is not worth the squeeze. I always get that wrong. The juice is not worth the squeeze. When they look at the numbers, it's easier to just stay home. So when you hear people saying, where are the workers? This is part of the answer to the question. They're doing dependent care. The other part of the question on where are the workers can be found in young adults. So when you look at the data at the beginning of COVID-19, this was the group that was particularly disproportionately impacted. Why is that? 16 to 24, why were they impacted by COVID? That's right. A lot of them worked in industry sectors that shut overnight. So this group, 16 to 24, their unemployment rate surged to 25% within a month. The other reason they were impacted, educational disruption, right? These were the people who were in the later years of high school. They're the people who were in their early years of community college. COVID came about, either they couldn't adapt to remote learning or they had other pressures they needed to respond to. And so they moved out of education and moved out of the workplace. The problem is what? 2023, they haven't come back. Want to know where are the workers? When we look at this demographic, the answer is we don't quite know. And for everybody in here who is an employer, answering the needs of these two groups is going to be critical if you are ever going to be in a place where you can fill your openings. And then I made some implications about this earlier. Job quality, development are deteriorating. What does that mean? Make it up. There's no growth. But even where we've got jobs, what does it mean to say the quality is deteriorating? Deteriorating. No, the quality of the work. This is about the quality of the workplace experience. I don't want to say the workplace because it has nothing to do with the physical attributes of the workplace, but the experience that the employee has. What does that mean to say that's deteriorating? Okay, so people are making different decisions. People see the world in a different way. Particularly coming out of COVID, people see their lives in a different way and want to make sure they have work-life balance. That's true, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But that's not why the job quality is deteriorating. Yes, I see you over there going, yes, yes, I got the answer, I got the answer. Did everybody hear this? So deterioration in some part is seen as um, a different relationship between employer and employee, one in which the employee wants to feel more of a sense of respect and more ownership of the work and um, more opportunity to collaborate. And increasingly, employers are saying, we don't feel that. We don't feel that, right? Um, so this is something we heard a lot from employees all over the state, that I'm just not feeling it. And what it would take reflects a very different way of defining the employer-employee relationship than was true a century ago. But I'm not sure that what it would take today is that much more different than 50 years ago. And what has been really interesting to me, so I did this work before COVID in 2019. This was the conversation. Many employers were like, meh, whatever. But coming out of COVID, given the tightness of the labor market, every employer I work with right now wants to talk about this. What do I do to be an employer of choice and to improve my competitiveness in recruiting and retaining employees in my industry sector? Every employer I work with wants to talk about this. So I hear you when you say it's not something that often is talked about, but it's talked about more today than it ever has been in the past. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about the who as you think about this opportunity to build a new comprehensive plan that creates opportunity for the residents of High Point. Since 2008, low-wage occupations have seen the most employment growth. I've already said middle-wage occupations have either declined or stagnated. Here is the data that shows you where we are. So this is employment growth by real wage, 2008 to 2018, right? You can see 10th, those are the most jobs. 90th percentile, those are pretty good. Where do we see for 30th through 60th? Very little growth. And this is North Carolina's data, not national, but North Carolina. All right. So life already was on a trajectory where we were losing a lot of middle income jobs all across North Carolina, irrespective of what industry sectors dominated your economy. But there's this other thing that has been happening for a while that is really driving this change. And indeed, during COVID-19, this other thing actually sped up. And that thing is called automation. This is one of my most favorite things to share with people because nobody really wants to believe it. Anybody here in telemarketing? Okay, because I was going to tell you to go find another job. This is the likelihood that your job will be eliminated or significantly altered as a result of automation. Who is calling you now on those annoying calls? It's a robot. You can't even be rude to them and feel justified, because how does that matter? That's it, all right? When I did this presentation for local government budget, people, they were like, well, that part about accountants and auditors is wrong. That can't be true. All right, who does your taxes? Somebody said a CPA. Maybe if you make that much money, for most of us, it's TurboTax. I mean, think about all of the platforms you now have. Those used to be people. Retail. I couldn't find one of you, not one, who had not used Amazon in the past, right? So much of our retail has gone online. I won't even get into a conversation about chat. We're not going there today, but you don't even have to worry about technical writing. Just writing alone may be a thing of the past. But which are the occupations that seem to be hardiest, most resilient against automation? I'm sorry? Highly skilled labor, and there's something else. Like, what about clergy? What is it about the clergy that makes that position so resilient to automation? That's right. That's right. When my grandma dies, I do not need a robot giving me comfort. It's the stuff where the interpersonal connection, where somebody needs to hold your hand and it needs to be a person. It's not transactional, it's relational. And for reasons that I don't exactly understand, dentists are there too. Now, quite frankly, my dentist annoys me because he talks to me when he's in my mouth. So, how was your summer, Anita? So, I actually think if I could find a robot to be a dentist, that'd be perfectly fine. But apparently, most people do not agree with that. Anybody up here that surprises you? Yeah. And the truth is, dental offices have become very automated. But apparently, people still want, at the end of the day, a human being playing around in their mouth. Yeah, so machinists, when they talk about machinists, yeah, they're actually talking about a much broader category of people. And as you know, many of the tasks that used to be done by hand by machinists are now done electronically by 3D printing machines. And I'm so with you. It's why I'm right here. Anything else here? So, as you're thinking about the future, what's going to be really important for you to think about in this driver is what do we have today that probably isn't going to be around or isn't going to be nearly as important in terms of job opportunities in the future based on the probability of automation. And to the point that was made earlier, the way to think about it is if it's something that can be routinized, it is more susceptible to automation. If it requires an interpersonal relational touch, it's less susceptible to automation. All right. So I want to go from that to just taking a look in North Carolina because different regions of the state and different sectors have been differently touched by automation. So when you think about Charlotte and you think about the predominant industry sectors in Charlotte, what first comes to mind? Yeah, you got it. All right. So you can see Charlotte here. This is North Carolina in the purpley line. You can see the triad as it relates to comparison with Charlotte in the light blue line, right? When you think about the triangle, what do you think about when you think about the predominant industry sector? Tech, biotech, yeah? All right. How do you compare the recoveries from 2008 between Charlotte and the triangle? Yeah. Think about Asheville. What are you thinking about here? tourism, tourism and a lot of beer. And how's Asheville doing vis-a-vis the rest of the state? Yeah. Okay, not quite as well as Charlotte on the Triangle, but it was still holding its own. All right. When we look at the triad overall, what do we see? So, not quite as resilient to bumps in the economy. Not doing poorly overall, but when there is a downturn, it takes longer to come out of it. Rocky Mount area, what do we see? I'm sorry? Yeah, yeah. Somebody said it's still declining. So coming out of, like, look at this. It wasn't like that far in 2008, but when it went down, and it is not coming back up. And then your somewhat neighbors in the Hickory area, down in the foothills, not quite Rocky Mount, doing some really interesting things in their economic development, but still having a harder time bouncing back from disruptions. Here is what we know. We know enough to expect that there will be a recession. There are always recessions. We can go back and count how many years it is between one to the other. There will be economic downturns. When we did this work, we didn't really know that there might be a recession that's caused by something that is a global pandemic that just closes everything overnight. But what both of those experiences tell us is it's not enough to have a strategy that works for the good times. You got to have a strategy that protects you against the hard times because you will have downturns. So resilience is really important and equally important as being robust as you think about your economic development strategies. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about what resilience might look like. This is during COVID, right? I said you got to be prepared for the downturns. At an individual level, when COVID struck, who were the people who were most likely to lose their jobs? People who had a high school diploma or less. People with some college, which includes folks who have an associate degree or a post-secondary certificate of high value, fared not as poorly, but not quite as well as people who have a bachelor's. As you heard in my introduction, I have done a lot of work recently on educational attainment, and I will just give you the Cliff Note version. I don't want to talk to you about why people don't need post-secondary credentials. I'm not even having that conversation with you. Because if I were talking to you about lifetime earnings, it would be clear the difference that post-secondary credentials have. But when we're talking about resilience, it's the ability to withstand the bumps that make the difference. Now, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, that every person should go to college, a four-year college. That is not what I'm saying. And in fact, when you look at this, when you break it out, I said you have associate's degrees, you have people who have high credentials, which may be a 6-month certificate in machining or whatever. You know the people who have nothing, who get nothing? The people who go to college, a four-year university, and drop out before they graduate. They get nothing. The market does not reward that in any way. And not only do they not get a bump in the market, many of them leave these institutions. So I say to 12th graders, if you don't think you're going to finish, don't go to a four-year school and take out loans to do it. Go to community college and start with something small. It may be just that certificate that you get in 6 months. And then stack on that some other certificate until you've gotten to your associate's degree. And if you're on fire after you got your associate's degree, transfer to a four-year university. But don't start there and accumulate $20,000 in debt and don't finish. All right, just a couple of things to say about the labor force versus unemployment as you all are thinking your way through the future. Unemployment rate is incredibly important. Everybody pays attention to it. Everybody dances when it's good. Anything at the 4% or lower rate is the reason to do a really good dance. But I want to encourage you, as you are looking deep into your data, to spend as much time looking at the labor force participation rate. What is the difference? These are people in your community who are looking for work but can't find it. That's the unemployment rate. So when it's low, it means most of the people who are looking for work can find it. The labor force participation rate, those are people who are outside of the labor force, but they are not looking for work. They have given up. And this is where you can see the weaknesses of your labor market. Who are the people who have As I said earlier, there was a huge distinction between those people who had a high school diploma or less in terms of how they were affected by COVID. So this is just a way to, again, pinpoint this importance of resiliency. Unemployment rate, North Carolina, high school diploma or less, increased by 12 percentage points almost immediately. Bachelor's degree or more increased by 5.5 percentage points. So fewer people with a post-secondary degree were impacted in unemployment. Same is true for lower labor force participation rate. Bachelor's degree, you had a decline of 1.2%, so that's how many people who were in came out. That meant labor force participation rate 71.9%. But look at this. High school diploma or less declined 4 percentage points by May of 2020 to 51.8%, which means a fraction of people, over half of those in North Carolina with a high school diploma or less, were actually in the process of looking for work. And again, what I want you to pay attention to is how many of these people have not returned. That is a lot of asset that is sitting on the sidelines. And when you think about your economy today, your competitive advantage is your workforce. It doesn't matter whether you're trying to recruit in new companies. The first question they're going to ask you is, labor market, labor market, labor market. Do you have an adequate supply? What are their qualifications? How will we be able to meet them or train them? Or whether you're focused on growing the companies you already have, they're going to want to know, if we invest in growth, who is going to be here to help us grow? And heaven forbid you're trying to build an entrepreneurial market. You've got to have surplus labor force in order for that to work. All right. So I'm not going to talk about this stuff right now, except to point out what I said just now around these labor force issues and who's not in it. So just to give you some sense of what's happening with young people 16 to 24 in North Carolina. Estimated about 150,000 young people ages 16 to 24 in North Carolina right now today are neither working nor in school. Remember what I said about assets sitting on the sideline? That's an asset sitting on the sideline. Statewide, the average is 14%. Guilford is 9.8%, Forsyth 11.8, Randolph 13. I can't give you specific numbers for High Point because they don't give them to us like that in the American Community Survey. Look at the differences statewide by different demographic groups. Again, 14% statewide, 8.8% of white young adults, 12.5% of Latino, 15.6% of Black, and 20% of American Indian young adults not working, not in school. So, a few questions for you. I'll throw out the question and then I'll take one or two answers and then I'll stop and give you a chance to ask me questions. When you see these numbers and you think about the assets you have in High Point, how would you build on those assets to take control of your local community? And do you want me to use the mic so that you can hear? Yeah, okay. Maybe it's a good thing I'm in my tennis shoes because now I can run around like Oprah. How are you going to build on the assets?
I was just saying, shouldn't we start with what are the assets?
Yeah. And let's assume that Anita just told you at least one of your assets are the people who are sitting on the sidelines. What are you going to do about that?
We have to take them off the sidelines.
I so agree, but I'm looking for a little bit more of your strategy.
But you'd have to find out why, right? So if the track that people would normally be on would be high school and then either job market or some sort of higher education, right? And these individuals starting at age 16 aren't doing that. The question is, why aren't they doing that, right? So why aren't they still in school? Why didn't they get a job? Why didn't they go into education? I mean, there's all kinds of guesses you could have for that, but somebody probably did a study and probably knows why.
So I love the idea that we've got to start with the why.
Yeah.
That you can't start with the what, because you're going to be fixing the wrong problem if you start with the what. You got to figure out, why is this happening? Okay?
Yep.
Hold on. We're going that way, and then we'll come to you. Yes. This is the part I love. I love this. Go for that.
Talk about the people that are sitting on the side.
Yes. So there is the question of, well, if you're not in work and you're not in school, what exactly are you doing? And my guess is that the answer is all over the place. I have children in this age group. I keep telling my husband, let's downsize right now. So if they decide they want to come home, we would say, I wish we could accommodate you, but we don't have any room at the inn anymore, right? Because it's just, but look at the increased number of young adults who are living at home with their parents. Like, that's a real statistic. Could you give her the mic so that we could catch that?
That they have become caregivers.
The question is, do we think they have become caregivers? And there's no question that some of them have. Yes.
Well, my question was going to be, do we know who they are? Somewhere there's a statistic, and we know who they are. But do
Yeah.
we really? Because if you go to a recruiting firm or anyone that's looking for employees, well, none of these people are proactively going out to look for these people to maybe, help them along
Yeah.
and say, hey, there's opportunity there.
Yep.
Maybe, there's usually a disconnect between, also why they're not looking. Maybe because they've lost hope and they don't know that there is an opportunity. And if nobody's reaching out to them to say, hey, there is a job here for you. But also the recruiting agencies are waiting for people to come to them to say, I'm looking for a job.
So,
So it's I mean,
yes. So let me just say, you all have really gone through all three of these questions, and I want to respond to this. So how are we reaching them? With all respect to every governmental and quasi-governmental agency that might be represented in this room, I'm School of Government, you are not set up for this problem. You're set up for talking to young people who are in school because you know where to find them, right? You're set up for talking to the folks who come to you, that show up at your NC Works, commission, whatever. You know how to talk to those people, but you are not set up to go out and find these folks and to engage them. Just 2 weeks ago, I was doing a series of focus groups in a community in North Carolina, and went from a focus group where a community college vice president was saying, I have unprecedented money. I will pay you to come get a short-term credential. That's how much money I have. I can't get anyone through the door. And then I go over to the library and I do a focus group of young people. And this young man is saying to me, Miss Anita, I don't really want to work for anybody. I want to open my own car mechanic shop. And I'm really good at this. And I fix a lot of things. But I want to really be able to do it right. And I say to him, hey, maybe you should go over to the community college. He looked at me as though I had said, maybe you should go to Yale. That was the look on his face. Like, what? So I call up the vice president of community college and I said, dude, if you're sitting in your office waiting for that guy to come to you, you'll be wasting a lot of time and a lot of money. You got to figure out a way to go to him and to make it possible, right? This is a different group of people with a different set of needs. I'm not pretending I have all the answers. I'm just saying to you all, if you think you have people who are latent assets in High Point, and you want to bring them into the economy so that everybody does better, you're going to have to find new ways to engage. Any questions for me on that? Yes. Right behind. No, we are not saying we've never seen it before. What is unique about this moment are the implications, because we probably have not, in your lifetime or mine, seen a labor market quite this tight. So when the labor market isn't tight, the impact of having people sit on the sidelines is not quite the same. But when employers, I didn't show you this because I'm trying to get through more things, but when North Carolina employers tell you they don't have job seekers for their openings, 88% of employers say the reasons they're having hiring difficulties and cannot maximize their economic potential is because they have too few applicants. That means we have to do something about the folks on the sidelines. That's what's different. That's 88% of employers. Unreal. Any other questions for me? All right. That was my longest section. Now I want to talk a little bit about the social context, because economy is important, but economy without thinking about what's happening around it doesn't really tell you very much. All right. So North Carolina, we're growing. We took a little bit of a dip, but we're back in business as one of the fastest growing states in the country. We expect to be at 13 million in the next 8 years. Pretty amazing. But we're not growing equally. So you can see from this map where there is the dark green, that's where we're having the fastest growth. And then there are places that are brown, various shades of brown, and those are places that are actually losing population. You all are tracking North Carolina on your growth. So people are moving here. Talk about that. Let's talk about age for a second. Because when you think about the future, it's important to think about where you're focused on in terms of the population. So this is between 2010 and 2021. And what you can see is overall North Carolina's population has been pretty stable. Now, you wouldn't really expect that in a state where you see the numbers going up, because you would expect the state to be getting much older. Why do we have this stability in North Carolina? Particularly for the 20 to 34 and 35 to 49. I'm sorry? So the answer was we have so many universities here, and those universities attract young people, right? So when you're looking at North Carolina's age differentials, it's important to recognize that post-COVID, any growth advantage we've had has not come from births, it's come from in-migration. And for the last 40 years, much of our growth has come from in-migration. So you're thinking both about the people who are here and who will remain here, and you have to be also delivering a community for the people who will come from other places. It's how you're growing, it's how the Triangle is growing, it's how Charlotte is growing. Every place in North Carolina that is growing from in-migration. And there's some places like Charlotte where some of the in-migration, a lot of the in-migration might be coming from other parts of North Carolina. That is not true for High Point. Your people are coming from out of state. All right, just a little bit thinking about the racial distribution. Things have been fairly stable in North Carolina, except for between 2010 and 2021, one group, actually two groups, and those two groups would be, work with me, people. Make it up. What are the two groups where you think we have increased the numbers racially? Hispanic and Asian. And there is no indication that either of those trajectories will change. All right. So what does that mean when people are moving in? It means all sorts of good things. It means nice restaurants. Don't forget what you promised me at the beginning. All right? But it sometimes can mean that you have housing issues. Housing affordability, 33% of a household income. That's federal guidelines, right? In 2011, the median value for a house affordable to a householder earning the city's median owner income was the same as a decade later. So you all are actually doing a very good job in your home ownership numbers, meaning you have not had the escalation of cost to buy a house that we have seen in other parts of North Carolina. Where you are struggling, have been, and continue to struggle is in your median rents, right? um, a person who is earning your median renter occupied income will not will not be able to easily afford an apartment in High Point. All right. So this is just showing you where you are vis-a-vis other folks in terms of median rents, right? You're not Asheville. But note that in nearly every metro region, more than half of all workers can't afford median rents. This is like a crisis issue in North Carolina. Here's you. About the same as the Durham Chapel Hill Metro. Not quite as affordable as Winston-Salem, not nearly as affordable as Hickory, Lenore, Morganton Metro. Just so that you can keep things in perspective, there are actually only 5 counties in all of North Carolina that have location affordability. Just go home and think about that later tonight. So, here are my questions for you. Assuming you continue on the same growth trajectory, are you prepared for the growth? Growth is good, we like it, but are you prepared? Is that a yes, no, or a how in the world are we supposed to know? You want to say more about that?
I swear we had another meeting, y'all. I apologize. They double booked us this evening. But in terms of housing, I mean, this is something we've kind of been known for the past few years. And granted, I think the pandemic slowed down some of what our plans were to really address housing here. But we knew coming into this term, and I don't know if you know, I serve on city council here, so I should probably say that. I'm sorry. We knew coming into this term that we were probably going to need to do some work around housing. Pandemic hit, we didn't get to do as much. Now, granted, we've still attracted a good amount of housing development. Don't get me wrong. But for where our city's going, how our population keeps growing, what's happening with the university, what's happening with revitalization, what's happening with our blight remediation, which is also taking some housing stock off the market. We're losing some of our supply, but not increasing our supply at the same rate that our demand is increasing. Law of supply and demand, you're going to have those prices go through the roof if we don't find some way to address it.
And this is the double whammy, right? Well, people are moving in, and that means there's more demand for limited supply. And if you don't get the supply in line, then obviously that's just the basic law of economics. Housing will be more expensive because it will be a limited commodity. But the other thing that affects affordability is the people who are moving in have more income than the people who are there, which means they can pay more. So then that has an accelerated effect on the housing affordability. So thank you for coming. As you work on your affordable housing, you're going to have to be very clear about that.
But is housing the only thing that you need to prepare for growth, right? I mean, you
No.
need all of the other things that go with it, right? You need the ability for them to buy groceries. You need the ability for them to get gas. You need the ability for them to get from here to there. You
You
need
need
the
to think
ability
about
to,
transportation for
right.
sure. You need to think about your schools. So if you go back to the age um, pie, are you going to expect more younger people, and are they going to have families? And are you going to need to think about that in terms of your facilities for schools, and also making sure that you actually have people who can teach in those schools? What does it mean for childcare? If your projections are lots more younger families, then you need to be sure that you have a community that can afford childcare. You also need to be thinking about your demographics and how you are sure that you're building a community that is a truly inclusive community for all. So no, the answer to your question is housing is just one thing you need to worry about. If you come to the 1 week session with me, I'll take you through every other thing you need to worry about, and you will never sleep again.
But that's why I'm saying, do we know? You asked, are we prepared? Is the answer yes or no? And I'm saying, I don't know that we know, because you'd have to know all of those
Yeah.
things, right? So chances are the answer is no, but I mean, you really have to go down and say, these are all the things that we have to do. Are we prepared for all of these things? But you can't answer that unless you know what all the things are.
So you took us down this road earlier, and it's the right road. When I ask you a goofy question like are you prepared for growth, what I'm really looking for is, do you have a process by which you are asking yourselves the questions around all of the implications for growth? Or are you going to wake up one day and go, oh my Lord, what happened to High Point, and why was I sleeping on the job while this was happening, right? So nobody gets to say, yes, we're prepared. But if you don't feel confident that you have a process for continually asking, what are the implications? What are the implications? How do we prepare now for what's coming a decade from now, 2 decades, 3 decades? Then you end up like some other places in North Carolina that are having that oh my Lord moment. And you can't depend, to your point about housing developers, you cannot leave it just to the private sector to make these decisions about preparation. Because the private sector ought to be engaged, but it's not their job to think about the big picture. Their job is to think about their industry sector and how to maximize their profit. That's what they do, and that's what they should be doing. But somebody better be thinking about the big picture. All right. Do you all want to ask me any questions about growth? Because I don't know what time it is. What time is it? I told you I'd let you go. I said 6:45. I was going to let you go, didn't I? All right. All right. I want to keep my word, kind of. All right. So I'm not going to get into all of these health um, data points, but just remember, you all have some work to do around your health outcomes, and that is true not just with your physical health outcomes, but you got some pretty high numbers in terms of mental health. Now, everybody everywhere coming out of COVID has seen a rise in mental health data, but yours persisted high before COVID and has gone higher than others. So pay attention to that, right? And then other things you need to pay attention to obviously are crime, and nothing else I need to talk about there. And I'm not going to say much about the changing technology, except to say have some more work to do on broadband infrastructure. And I feel like it goes without saying, broadband in 2023 is like electricity in 1883. I mean, if you don't have it, you're not in it, right? So pay some attention to that, where there are people who are out of reach, who find broadband out of reach. I love nothing more than to destroy people's optimism with a bunch of numbers. Do it all day, every day. Um, if you go to NC Impact and Carolina Across 100, you can actually find all the data for all of the counties. This is actually one of the few times where I'm talking in a city, but I need 4 counties to cover every itty bit of it. But you can find all that information by county, and you can always reach me at the School of Government, NC Impact, SOG, UNC, EDU. I am happy to answer any questions anytime, especially from friends who give up a Wednesday evening to come talk data and change. And the good news is, I'm just a warm-up act here. You've got these open house road shows that are coming up, April 11th and April 12th. High Point Public Library, 11:30 to 1:30. Deep River Friends Meeting House, those two are on April 11th. And then there's one on Congdon Yards, 11:30 to 1:30 on April 12th, and Carl Chavis Memorial YMCA on April 12th. And both of those will be opportunities for you to start getting your community ready for all of these drivers of change. So again, thank you so much for spending the evening with me. I'll be here until 7 to answer questions, and if you've got questions after that, call me, email me. I'm around. Would love to be supportive. Thank you.